American soccer fans, welcome to episode 141 of the USA Soccer Cast. We are bringing you everything about the U.S. national teams, the players, the leagues, and everything else that impacts the game of soccer in these United States. I'm Donald Wine, and finally, we have a head coach for the U.S. men's national team. It is Mauricio Pochettino. He will be at the helm as he was announced as the team's new coach just before the USMNT took on New Zealand on Tuesday night. We're first, obviously, we could discuss this for weeks, but we will first discuss some of what Pochettino brings to the table. And then after the break, we have some questions that were submitted via social media from some of our listeners out there that we will address. But again, first, let's discuss the 52-year-old Argentine coach. He signs on to a deal that is worth a reported $6 million per year through the 2026 World Cup. $6 million a year is almost 5 times what we were paying Greg Berhalter. So this is a huge step up for the Federation on the men's side. They had to secure funding from a couple of hedge fund billionaires to get this deal across the finish line. And they employed the women's coach, Emma Hayes, who had a friendship with Pochettino from their days at Chelsea. And she was instrumental, apparently, in getting Pochettino to sign on to this project. Pochettino was one of the big-time coaches that was available. He had coaching stints, of course, at Espanyol, Southampton, where he knew U.S. soccer director Matt Crocker. Of course, the big one, Tottenham Hotspur, is main, where he's known for, but he also has stints at big clubs like Paris Saint-Germain and Chelsea, who Chelsea might be the reason why this took so long. We've been waiting for this news for, over a month now? And mainly it was because Chelsea owed him some money from when he left that club. And owing wages, and I guess the way the contract was set up, they had to figure out how to pay him before he was able to sign on to a new job, because if he signed on before he got the money was no longer available. So I think they worked out a deal where he could get the money that was owed, whether it was offset or not, and then sign on with U.S. Soccer. I believe U.S. Soccer is paying some of that salary that Chelsea owes and is being offset, similar to what you would see from a college coach who moves to another college. So again, Espanyol, Southampton, Spurs, PSG, and Chelsea, some big-time clubs. He's coaching some big-time games, some big-time moments. He took Spurs to the League Cup final in 2015 and then took them to the Champions League final in 2019. He won the French Cup with PSG in 2021 and Ligue 1 in 2022. And as I mentioned, he was most recently with Chelsea, where they lost in the League Cup final back in February. I think the one thing about Pochettino that he's known for, and I've been not I don't have a team in EPL, so I don't have a bias towards Pochettino as some others do, whether you are a Spurs fan or a fan of another team. But what is generally known about Pochettino is that he's known for getting the most out of his players, which is something that is very much needed on the U.S. men's national team right now, as they try to figure out how to get their confidence back and also boost their sense of urgency on the field with the World Cup less than 2 years away. The team just finished their September window under interim coach Mikey Veras. They lost to Canada 2-1 over the weekend and then drew New Zealand 1-1 on Tuesday night when this announcement occurred. It's not a great window for the United States. And coupled with how they played, where it didn't feel like they had the fight as a squad that we are used to seeing from United States men's national teams and women's national teams, this means that Mauricio Pochettino has a lot on his plate. He has his work cut out for him and how to get the squad to understand the gravity of the moment and how big it is for them, the opportunity that exists for them to improve and show that they can be this golden generation that we say that they have been. And in some ways they haven't quite lived up to. But he has a lot of work to do, and it's going to be in a short time period because there's not that many windows between now and the 2026 World Cup. His first matches will be at home on October 12th against Panama. That match will be in Austin. Then the U.S. men's national team hits the road to Guadalajara to take on Mexico in a friendly. So Poch will get his first real dose of CONCACAF in October. Then that is taken to the max in November, when the team will be in the CONCACAF Nations League quarterfinals with home and road legs. So we're really talking about teams that we've seen before, but again, it's going to be new to Pochettino, and it'll be a chance for him to implement whatever system that he wants to bring to this national team. And that could change, right? We've seen how his style may have deviated some between some of these coaching stints that he had, depending on the personnel, but also in line with what he could get. The budget at Spurs wasn't as big as it was at PSG or Chelsea. Chelsea would buy everybody that he wanted. And you don't have that on the national team. You have a finite player pool. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does with these first couple of games against opponents that we as American fans are used to seeing, but will still kind of have an air of newness with a new coach at the helm. This conversation is going to segue perfectly into some of the questions received from listeners of the show, but we will answer those questions on the other side of a quick break. So stick with us. Hey everyone, are you looking for the latest gear for your U.S. national teams, Major League Soccer, the NWSL, or any other team in the world of soccer? The USA Soccercast has affiliate partnerships that are ready to help you out. Head to linktree.com/USA Soccercast, where we have links to Homage, Fanatics, the MLS Store, and Breaking Team. You can get the jersey, shirt, hat, or accessory you're looking for to support your team, while also saving some money and helping this show in the process. Again, linktree.com/USA Soccercast. Click on the links and get your gear. And we thank you as always for your support of the show. We're back and we're discussing Mauricio Pochettino taking over as the U.S. men's national team head coach. Obviously a very, very big deal. A long time coming. We have been waiting for this news, as I mentioned, since close to the end of the Olympics. I believe the Olympics were still going on when news first came that Mauricio Pochettino was the guy that U.S. soccer was focusing on. And again, it took a while to get across the finish line. There was a lot of talks between the two entities, the two parties. And finally, he is our head coach, again, announced on Tuesday. I took it to social media and asked for people to submit questions, and a couple of people, thankfully, submitted questions and had a few questions between them. So I want to address those, and I want to start with my friend Boris Nistovich. And Boris, first of all, one of his questions is, how do you see Pochettino transitioning to national team management? And I think that's the biggest question for any coach who has not been a coach on the international level, as Pochettino has not. He has done it all on the club level, and switching to the national team focus is a little bit interesting for him. He's going to be stationed in Europe. Doesn't feel like he's moving to the United States. I don't think his staff is going to be, at least some of it, most of it's going to be in Europe as well. And he doesn't have to move to Atlanta or to Chicago, as other coaches have had to do. But I also think that he can't just go out and get players. So it's going to be how he adapts to that. And in any situation where a coach comes in and they have a system on the club level, it's easy to say, I have this system and I need this particular player. I need that particular player. I need this player over here. I need this goalkeeper. I need this this assistant coach. I need this specialist on this team. And the club can go out and spend the money that they need to go get those players. That obviously can't happen on the national team. So with a finite player pool, how does he react to what we have? And how do the players adapt to the system? And how does the system adapt to the players? Because it has to be both. And I think, funny enough, you have to see players understand their roles. And those roles, can't change from minute to minute, second to second. We've seen that on the national team level. But we've also seen where guys come in and they get complacent because they have one role and they just do that role. And it's, that's what they do. So I think the question is, one, for Pochettino, how does he utilize the personnel that he does have? How does he bring in new players or scout new players that are in the system, in the player pool, that are Americans, maybe dual nationals? How does he approach that? Because that's a different question. Does he, really step up recruiting on that level? And how does he create competition at some of these positions? Yes, we have a group that a lot of us believe are the starters. Anytime they're on the national team, they should be on the field. They should be starting and playing 75 to 90 minutes, assuming that everyone is healthy. But there's also the depth question. And right now, there isn't a lot of depth in this program. And that's what we've been trying to figure out over the last year, to not much success. When some of these guys are injured, there are some guys that we have seen been, in and out of the national team over the last year who have been injured. And what happens when a Tyler Adams is not here, when a Gio Reyna is not here, when Tim Weah is out, when Serginho Dest is out for a whole year, or, in Nations League when he got the red card? How do you adjust to that? And where does the depth step up? And I'm not sure that we've seen that to the level that is required to really make a push at the World Cup. So that is going to be part of his transition, is trying to figure out how to maximize the value of all these players. And by value, I mean on the field and as a team. How can they get to be playing with a sense of urgency and a sense that every game matters and means something in a period where they are not playing a lot of games that are competitive, at least official competitions? Boris also asked, is there a worry that no American manager was at the level where they could be appointed? And first of all, I don't think so. I think that U.S. Soccer considered a lot of people. And if you just go based off all the leaks that were out here over the last month, it was very much silly season for head coaching searches. It felt like that there were some Americans that were in the mix. Steve Cherundolo was probably the one American manager that was like at the forefront of being in the mix. When you talk about all the other coaches that have, maybe coached in MLS or haven't, from American perspective, the American coach that was very much centered and a part of the talks was Steve Cherundolo. He was one that at one point people said he was the favorite to be the coach. Pellegrino Matarazzo also was rumored for a little bit that he had been contacted. So there was guys who were in the mix, but I don't think it was a sense that an American manager was at the level where they could be appointed. Because if Pochettino doesn't sign on, we might have an American taking over instead of him. And the one thing that I think people need to understand out there, at least for me, from my chair, it felt like there was a lot of anti-American sentiment when it came to who the next coach should be. Not just anti-American, but also anti-MLS. People did not want an American to take over. They did not want a coach who had coached in MLS to take over, because they felt like that skewed their view on which players were good. Never mind that, again, we just lost the guy who was in Major League Soccer, and Greg Berhalter, who who was the first coach to bring in all European rosters and field all European based lineups. It didn't track, but still that sentiment was there. And I was always in the boat of going after the best coach we could possibly get to move this team forward. If that was an American, great. If it was a coach from abroad, also great. And in my mind, also the one thing that I think was left out of that equation was, did the coach want to be here? And I think we found out that a lot of coaches that, with a blank check were being asked if they wanted to take over, the answer to them was no. And this wasn't as highly coveted a position as the fan base hoped it would be. And, you didn't get a Jurgen Klopp despite what appeared to be numerous attempts to try and coax him out of retirement. And if Klopp wanted to come, that would have been my pick. Yeah, that'd been great. But I think in Mauricio Pochettino, we have the best big name coach that was in what I called the like attainable level, a guy that we could go out and get. He was available. He had some interest and clearly wanted to be a part of something where he could rebuild this program as it prepared to host the World Cup. And I think that pressure of hosting the World Cup is one that people were also leaving out of the mix, because that was important too. Some of these coaches did not want to be a part of that. And, or at least in my mind, probably didn't want to be a part of that. And when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. That's a lot of pressure for any coach. Just pressure to get a team to qualify for the World Cup is even more to not only represent the host nation, but a rabid fan base that expected the team to do super well. When I say super well, I mean a lot of people are talking about it would be a failure if we don't get to the semifinals of the World Cup, a tournament that is the biggest in the world that only 8 or 9 teams have ever won, and the U.S. is not one of them. At least on the men's side, it has not won. And so I'm thinking that Pochettino embraced that pressure and he's ready to accept that pressure. These players are as well, and they have to be a part of that. They have to embrace the moment of walking out representing the United States of America in a tournament that is largely based in the United States. That is a part of the equation, and I think American coaches might have been ready for that, but the fan base was not ready for them. So I think in Pochettino, you kind of get the best of both worlds here. You get a big name coach. He's abroad, but he also is clearly ready to accept the responsibility of preparing one of the host nations to host the biggest tournament in the history of the world. And that's not a hyperbole. 48 team World Cup is going to be the biggest that this world has ever seen. And Pochettino appears to be ready for that. Finally, Boris asks, Poch does have a particular style he wants his teams to play, but how fast do you see the team adapting to that strategy? And I think this is a very good question because it's not like a club schedule where you're playing every week and you get lots of practice time with your players. As everybody knows, there's only a certain number of set of windows, and not every player is in every window. So you have a finite amount of time to implement a system. And I think it's hard to do that on the national team level, and it takes some time. Against, with Berhalter, it took a while for these players to adapt to the way he wanted them to play. And when they finally got on that level, people understood it, but it took a while because guys were playing out of position or they didn't know assignments, they didn't know defensive responsibilities and duties, and how he generally wanted them to move forward. So with Pochettino, it's going to be interesting to see how he adapts to that, the shortened timetable to really get things going. And yes, he's going to implement some new things, but it's going to take some time for these guys to really adapt to it. So that may mean some struggles. And we may need to be patient in the coming months as he decides to implement the things that he wants to do, and even some of the personnel and player changes and where guys play in the field and what they're supposed to be doing. All of that's going to change. How it's going to change, even if you know Potch very well and you supported him because he was your team's coach on the club level, doesn't necessarily mean he's going to bring all of that to the national team level because he just can't. There's not a lot of time to do so. So we have to wait and see what he actually is going to do. So, Boris, thank you for those three questions. Really appreciate that. I want to move on to a couple of questions from Dave Wainwright, who also wrote in. And one of the questions that Dave has is, with no qualification in 2026 for the United States, who are we going to play during the FIFA windows other than CONCACAF nations? I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, there's not a lot of teams out there that can play because everyone is trying to qualify for the World Cup. Everyone's trying, also has other competitions, Africa Cup of Nations, Asia Cup. We had Euro qualification. We have Nations Leagues. All of these factors are going to affect and limit who we end up playing. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, we only have 10 official windows left. That is not including the January camps that we traditionally do, that April friendly that we sometimes do, that we've done in the past. Those out of window games that US soccer likes to do, but no, like very few teams in the rest of the world do. We only have 10 official windows left. As I mentioned, October, we have Panama and Mexico. In November, we have CONCACAF Nations League quarterfinals. And then in March of 2025, we have the CONCACAF Nations League finals, assuming we qualify through the quarterfinals. So the first three windows, you're playing CONCACAF teams. There's sort of ifs, ands, or buts about it. The first time that we are able to play teams outside of this region, other than January camp and other than, again, an April friendly, is in June, right before the Gold Cup. We have a window that has two friendlies, and the teams that are available are Mexico and Canada, obviously, because they are co-hosting with us. They're available for every window from here on out, but also Oceania and Africa. And that's really it. No UEFA, no CONMEBOL, which is really where people are focusing. People want us to play the Germanys and the Englands and the Argentinas of the world. They're not available right now. So that is a big issue. So you're going to have to be creative about who you end up playing. June and July, we have the CONCACAF Gold Cup. And the one thing that U.S. soccer should continue to push CONCACAF to do, and what we've been hearing that will happen, is that it will be a sized up tournament. I think 24 teams, of which I believe there will be 16 from CONCACAF, of course, the United States being one of them, and then 8 invitees from other parts of the world. And I think is going to be 2 teams from each of the other confederations, save for Oceania. Oceania would not be a part of this. And so what that means is you could get some big teams coming for the Gold Cup. And for them, it's a way to kind of see the United States and figure out where they want potentially their training camps to be for the World Cup, scouting those type of things out. And it's a way for them to get the United States and kind of feel what it's going to be like playing in the summer here in 2026. So that is a one chance for the United States to maybe get some better talent and play in a more competitive atmosphere. Now, again, September, October, November of next year, you do have friendlies, and then more of these confederations are involved. And then in March of 2026, you have two friendlies for everybody except for the UEFA teams that will be in the playoff, and then the Interconfederation playoff participants, which will also be taking place during that window. And then you're at June. You have two friendlies, which are warm up friendlies for the World Cup, and then off we go for the 2026 World Cup. 10 windows. So it's not that many. And when you think about the number of windows or the few number of windows, take into account that if you're talking about the teams that you really want the United States to play, there's not that many of them. If we're talking about the top 20, 25 teams in the world, or top 30 teams in the world, there's not that many teams that are available by my count. And again, obviously this could all change, but between now and 2026, these are the teams, these are some of the teams that could play in some of these windows. Japan, Iran, South Korea, Australia, Morocco, Senegal, Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Uruguay, Ecuador. That's it. The UEFA's of the world, they're out until March of 2026 for the most part, because uh they're doing a bunch of they're doing Nations League right now, and then they're doing World Cup qualifying. And don't get mad at the schedule, because UEFA set it up this way and everyone else has to kind of work around it. The reason why Nations League exists is because UEFA created it. CONCACAF just perfected it. And I think people have to understand that, and really when they're getting mad online, they need to be mad for the right reason. The reason why we are not going to get some of these teams to come and play us is because the schedule just does not allow for it. And again, short of a January camp where we're not going to get the full rosters, we are going to see some teams that probably we wouldn't see, but in a way that's good. Because in an expanded World Cup, you need to play teams that you wouldn't normally see. A group stage game. I mean, people this the window last year when we played Oman and Uzbekistan. But Uzbekistan and Oman are teams that almost competed in the 2022 World Cup and are easily teams that you can see in a group stage match in the World Cup in 2026, because again, there are 48 teams. There are going to be some teams that traditionally have never made a World Cup that will be in this one. And so you kind of have to play different styles, different teams, different confederations, and you have to get creative, because yes, you may not be able to play England. So who plays like England? Play that team. If you want a team that plays like Argentina, find them. It doesn't have to be Argentina directly. It could be a team that plays similar to them, which is why you end up playing like a Paraguay or an Ecuador. But these are the things that Pochettino has to figure out. These are some of the things that U.S. soccer has to figure out. And these are the things that U.S. soccer fans have to reconcile themselves with. We have to understand that the schedule and the calendar is not going to allow for us to play the teams that we want when we want them. It is not our schedule. We did not create it. We have to go by it, though. And so understand that some of these teams that I mentioned would be great to come to the United States and play. We may have to go on the road to play some of these teams too, because of how their schedules line up. And if we need to do that, maybe we spend a window away. But with the World Cup coming to our shores, I doubt that's going to happen for us between now and June of 2026. There's just not a lot of windows, again, save for CONCACAF Nations League, where we are going to be required to go abroad. So there's not going to be a lot of opportunities where we do that. So don't think that we could just pack up and, yeah, just send a team to Brazil or something like that. That's just not going to happen all the time. So don't expect it. But again, we'll have to see how creative they get when it comes to scheduling over the next few months. And again, I have mentioned this before, but there are some teams that obviously we could play. It's just a matter of getting them on the calendar. And also the final thing is those teams want to have to play you. If teams don't want to play you, then it doesn't matter how bad you want them. They're going to say no, and you got to move on to the next one. That's just how it's going to work. So again, appreciate that question, Dave. And Dave's second question is about formations. And he asked, will Pochettino employ a standard 4-3-3 or perhaps a 4-3-2-1? Look, I can't tell you a lot about Pochettino's style of play. watching the teams that he has coached over the years, yeah, sure, you get a sense of how his teams operate, but I wasn't necessarily focused on the tactics sort of thing. He was not coaching teams that I cared about. He was not coaching against teams that I cared about, save for maybe the occasional Champions League game. But I think it depends on the personnel. First, we got to get everybody back healthy. We got to get everybody playing to the level that is required, both on the club level and on the national team level. And then after that, I think the question is which players that Pochettino believes will be on the field or must be on the field for his system to work. And it may not be, an initial thing where he has, hey, this is, how I want the midfield to play. And whoever's there can just plug and play. We could flow between different lineups, different formations, different combinations as he tries to figure out what works and what doesn't. And once he settles on that, then sure, then everybody's going to be on the same page. But side note, I do find it interesting that, a lot of people are talking about Pochettino's system and really being excited about it. When Greg Berhalter was a system coach and everybody raked him over the coals for even trying to employ a system on the national team because of some of the concerns that I addressed earlier. But again, I think how Pochettino plays it may not be the exact same as we saw at PSG, as he saw at Spurs, or we saw at Chelsea. He changed his tactics, he changed the style a little bit around at every stop he went, based on, again, the personnel or access to personnel that he could have. Here it's a little bit more finite on the national team because you can't get anybody who's not American, right? So you have to get guys and look at the personnel that we do have and say, how would they play under a Pochettino? And I think the most important thing, in my mind, at least initially, is not going to be the formation. It's going to be maximizing the play of everybody who is on the field, maximizing the ability of everybody coming together on this national team and playing to the best of their ability, getting the best out of every single corner of this program as we continue to build ourselves up and improve for a World Cup. It's a hard task for any coach. It is even harder for a coach that is coming in with less than 2 years to go. But that's the task, is to get these guys ready and to make them, once again, believe that they can take on the best teams in the world and win, because that's what you need to do if you want to advance at a World Cup. So the same concerns should still apply when it comes to employing a system, but you have to figure out who you have first. And I think this first window is going to be about Pochettino calling in guys to see what he is working with, to see what kind of things they can do. And the hope is everybody is healthy. The hope is Gio Reyna's back. The hope is Tyler Adams has recovered and is back. The hope is that all of these guys that were out of the September window are back and working with their clubs and performing to the best of their ability, to the point where they can get called in so they can show Mauricio Pochettino what they can do. And so it's a big question mark for the next 3 weeks on how we're going to do it. We probably won't understand fully until we get to know the guy and how he is planning to approach this job. There is an interview for a press conference with him tomorrow. I will be on that virtually, so we will see if I can get a question in. But it is also going to be streamed on YouTube, on US Soccer's YouTube. So go ahead and check that out. It's 11 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow, which is Friday the 13th. That'll be the first chance for reporters to kind of ask, hey, what are you planning on doing here? What's your goals? How do you plan on achieving those goals? And for me, I'm interested to see his philosophy and really study it for the first time. And we have, several weeks to do it before that first match. So again, Dave Wainwright, thank you so much for the question. Thank you to Boris as well. Really appreciate it. You can always submit questions to me online via Twitter or via email, usasoccercast@gmail.com. But that will do it for episode 141 of the USA Soccercast. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to follow us on Twitter, and we're on YouTube as well. Find us on both at USA Soccercast. Subscribe, rate, and review our episodes. It really helps and is greatly appreciated. Don't forget, we have affiliate programs with a ton of places to get you the gear you love and help you travel to see your favorite teams play or watch them from the comfort of your home. So head to our Linktree, linktree.com/USA Soccercast to learn more. Click the links to all those sites and support the show in the process. We have partnerships with a ton of places, and we have our stimulus store as well. So we've got the gear you need to be ready for the Pochettino era, as well as the Emma Hayes era, which is in full swing. talk to you again soon, y'all. Peace.